Happy Thursday, everyone. Today we're looking at an introduction to rotations and 180-degree rotations. So the first thing we want to talk about is what our goals for the day are. So our first goal is just to understand what a rotation is, and then the second part is to be able to rotate a figure 180 degrees and identify 180-degree rotations. We're going to start with the definition of a rotation. So when we think about a rotation, we think about a figure spinning or rotating. So for our definition, we have that it's a transformation performed by spinning a figure around a fixed point. That fixed point is called the center of rotation. So anytime that we spin a figure around a fixed point, that's a rotation. In Math 8, our center of rotation is going to be the origin, and we're going to specifically look at 90 degree, 180 degree, and 270 degree rotations. So here I have three identical pre-images, triangle ABC, and I'm going to take each of these and I'm going to rotate them the different degrees, 90 degrees, 180 degrees, and 270 degrees. So I have this image already made on a little piece of patty paper. So I'm going to show you that we're going to take this image and we're going to spin it or rotate it 90 degrees. We take our pre-image and we get a new image. And we'll label those points. And when we label our new points, they become A prime, B prime, and C prime. And we'll do the same thing for 180. So 180 degrees, we move 1 2/4 and we rotate it and it moves down to the opposite quadrant. And we'll label our points. We have A prime, B prime, and C prime. And then we do the same thing for 270 degrees. And this time we move 3 quadrants or 3/4. So we start here and we move 1, 2, 3. And this is where we'll end up. We'll put our new coordinates of our image. We have A prime, B prime, and C prime. So here we have examples: 90 degrees, 180 degrees, and 270 degrees. And we did that by taking our pre-image and spinning it 1/4, or moving it 1 quadrant for 90 degrees. We moved it 2/4, 1, 2, for 180 degrees. And for 270, we moved it 3/4, or through 3 quadrants. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so notice that with all three of these, the figures, the image and the pre-image, are congruent, meaning that they are the same shape and the same size. This means that a rotation is a rigid transformation. So we're going to write that down. We're just going to say, we're going to say the image and pre-image are the same size and shape, and I'm going to put congruent in parentheses here, so we remember congruent, same size and shape, since they are congruent, or they are the same size and shape, that tells us that rotations are a rigid transformation. Okay, looking specifically at 180-degree rotations, here I have the same example from the previous page. We have triangle ABC rotated 180 degrees to make triangle A prime, B prime, C prime. So rather than me giving you the rule, let's look at the coordinates for each of these and see if we can determine what the rule is ourselves. So let's start by naming the coordinates of triangle ABC. So A is at the point 1, 1, go over 1 and up 1. B, go over 1, 2, and up 1. So it's at 2, comma 1. And C is over 1 and up 1, 2, 3. So it's at 1, comma 3. So each of these are our original X and Y's of our pre-image. And then let's look at A prime, B prime, and C prime. So for our image, A prime is at -1, -1. B prime is at -2, and it's down 1, so -1. And then C prime we have at -1, 1, 2, -3. So it's at -1, comma, -3, and this is our image. So let's look at those and let's think about what happened. So our pre-image, if we say that it started at X, Y, then what happened to get the image for each one of these? If any of you said we just changed the sign, then you're correct. But mathematically, to show that, we use a negative. It's the opposite. So X, Y, we change the sign. We have opposite X and opposite Y. When we use that negative or that opposite, it makes it so that our rule works even if we started with a point that had a negative number. It would change it to a positive. So for a 180-degree rotation, our pre-image XY becomes the image -X, -Y. Okay, let's look at a couple of examples. Let's start by rotating a point. If we're asked to rotate point D 180 degrees, we want to start by identifying the coordinates of point D. So, point D is at -2, +1. So this is my pre-image. I know from my rule up here, I'm going to take my pre-image and I'm going to do the opposite for my image. So when I do this, I'm going to call it D prime, and I'm going to change the sign of both numbers. Since I have a -2, I'll change it to a positive, and since I have a +1, I'm going to change it to a -1. And then we're going to plot that point, so we're at +2, -1, which gives us D prime. Okay, let's look at a figure. So this is a little bit more difficult because we have 4 points, and our points are split across the axis, so they're in two different quadrants. But that's okay. We're going to treat it the same way. We're going to start by naming those 4 points. So we have W, X, Y, and Z. So W is at negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, negative 1. So negative 5, negative 1. X is at negative 1, 2, 3, 4, positive 1. So negative 4, positive 1 for X. Y is at negative 1, negative 1. And Z is at 1, 2, negative 3, 1, 2, negative 2. So negative 3, comma, negative 2. So I'm going to use my same process that we had on our first example and what we wrote down up here. I'm going to take my X, Y, and I'm going to change the signs of both of those for my new image. So for W prime, I have to change my negative 5 to a positive, and my negative 1 becomes a positive 1. So I have 5, 1. X, okay, we're going to change X prime so that it's positive 4 and negative 1. And then Y prime, they're negative 1, negative 1. So it becomes positive 1, positive 1. And finally, Z prime, we have negative 3, negative 2. So they're both going to be positive. So 3, 2. Now I'm going to plot my points, and I'm going to label them as I go just to make sure that I don't mess anything up. So I'm going to start at 5, 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we go up 1. And that becomes W prime. X prime is at 4, negative 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Down 1. And that's X prime. Y prime is at 1, 1. So we go right 1 and up 1. And that's our Y prime. And finally we have Z prime, which is at 3, 2. So 1, 2, 3, and up 1, 2. We'll connect them in order. W, X, Y, Z, and then back to W. So I have my pre-image and my image of figure WXYZ rotated 180 degrees. So to summarize what we looked at today with rotations, it means that it rotates or spins around a center of rotation, and in 8th grade that's always going to be the origin. It's always going to be the same shape and the same size, which tells us that those are congruent, and it's a rigid transformation. And when we're looking at 180 degrees, the point P of the pre-image will become P prime, which will be negative X, negative Y of the image. Good luck with your assignment.